So this is a video about my favorite video lenses in the Micro Four Thirds system, and before we get started, you should know that I mainly do event highlight videos and YouTube videos, so my experience has been highly shaped by those two things. Also, I mainly use Panasonic and Olympus lenses, except for two which are actually really important to my setup. But aside from that, I don't really use third-party lenses. Now, if you don't know, I mainly make these videos for my younger self or people like my younger self that are just getting into video but don't really know where to start in terms of equipment. When I was starting out, there were a lot of channels about gear already, but it was hard to find good content because there were a lot of amateurs that didn't have the technical skill, and then there were some high-end video guys that were speaking a different language. And on top of that, there wasn't a lot of Micro Four Thirds channels dedicated to video, so it made it really hard for me starting out, and that's kind of why I started making these videos. Okay, lenses are really important. They're probably one of the most important things in your kit, regardless of whether you're into photos or videos. So buckle up, this is gonna be a long one. So starting off with a budget setup. Now, there's a lot of misconception about a starter kit. One of the things that I don't like is that people think that it's not good enough. This setup is good enough. It's also gonna teach you about light and how to use it because you're gonna need a lot of it. And it's also gonna teach you about focal lengths and what it does to an image. And eventually, it's gonna show you what kind of focal lengths you gravitate towards. So this first category is a little bit of a cop-out because it's actually any of the kit lenses in the system. Honestly, I don't think that there's any bad kit lenses on the Micro Four Thirds system anymore. However, if you can swing it, try and get the 12 to 60 millimeter 3.5 to 5.6 from Panasonic. That is a solid lens that I still use to this day. If I'm out traveling or I want to make a video and I just want to use one lens, especially if it's outdoors, I use just this one lens. There's been whole trips that I've taken just on this one lens. Something to note about these kit lenses is that they're gonna need a lot of light for them to perform well. But don't be discouraged. Honestly, all you need is a door or a window during the day, obviously, and don't worry about it looking bad because honestly, I've seen YouTubers with millions of subscribers that still use this and don't have a professional lighting setup in their studio or at home. So with this category, all I wanted to get out there was that you probably have a camera right now, you probably have a kit lens on that camera. Don't feel bad about having this setup and don't keep thinking that if you had a more expensive lens that you'd have better video quality. No, all you really need to make your videos look better technically right now is more light, so focus on that for now. So the best way to move up from this setup to the more expensive setups in this video isn't to just buy the lenses I'm gonna be talking about, it's really to master this whole setup. And honestly, how you're gonna do that is you're gonna practice taking photos and taking videos and then studying photos and videos and what good photos and videos look like and continuing that process, and then eventually you're gonna be able to reconcile those technical skills to how you see the world and then recreate it in videos or photos. This next category is about YouTube. What are my favorite YouTube lenses? So for YouTube, there's really only two kind of shots that you need. Actually, you can really get away with one, but I prefer to at least have two. And one is gonna be that wide shot, which is kind of like this, and one is gonna be a little bit more tight, which you'll see in a lot of my B-roll. So having said that, there's a couple of options here. One is the budget setup. So for a budget setup, I recommend the Panasonic 25mm 1.7. And the reason I recommend it is firstly, it's affordable, but secondly, it can do both shots. The shot that's sort of a talking head setup like this, and also the tighter shots for B-roll. However, just keep in mind, it's not gonna be as wide as this. It's also not gonna get in as tight or zoom in as far as some of the other lenses that I'm gonna be talking about in this video. But bang for the buck, this is probably the best lens you can get. And at the time of writing this video, it's actually selling for $250 right now, but it's usually on for around $150. So I recommend that you either get it for $150 new or try and find it used, but always make sure that when you're buying used that you do your research, you know how to check a lens. So if you're concerned about this lens being too tight for your room, you can check it with your kit lens actually. Just set it to 25mm and see how far you need to be away from the camera in order to have this setup. And honestly, for most places, you're gonna have enough room. Now, the last thing to note about this lens is that it can focus close, but it's not gonna be as close focusing as some of the other lenses in the system, but this is gonna do a solid job, and I still use this lens today. So moving on to a more pro setup for YouTube, the ultimate oxymoron, because professionals make videos for Netflix, for Hulu, for big production companies, and not for YouTube, said no professional on YouTube ever. So for the setup, the price starts to get a little steep, but for me, it's really worth it, and it's really no surprise here. This is a pretty common setup. It's the Sigma 18-35 f1.8 with the Viltrox EFM2 adapter. But you may be thinking, what about the Panasonic 10-25 f1.7? That's a legitimate question, especially for photos. And I think that's the main advantage of the Panasonic over the Sigma, is that it's better for focusing in photos. However, there's a lot of things that the Sigma brings to the table that's better than Panasonic. And this video has been done, and it's been done very well by Gerald Undone. Go check out his video about this because he compares the Sigma and the Panasonic. But my reasons for why I chose the Sigma is, first of all, the Panasonic is so much more expensive. And then secondly, the Sigma has a lot more light gathering than the Panasonic. And did I mention that it's like twice the price for the Panasonic? So back to the Sigma, in my early days I actually shied away from the setup because there was no Viltrox adapter, which meant that I had to go with the Metabones. The Sigma lens is actually not that expensive considering how expensive good lenses actually are. The Sigma is around $700, but at the time the Metabones is also around $700. So for you to get this setup without a camera was already getting up to $1,400, maybe $1,500 at the time. And that's just a lot of money to pour into a setup. But finally the universe won, and the Viltrox EFM2 adapter came out, and it sells for around $150 to $200. So you can realistically get this setup for less than $1,000. And if you get the Sigma used, you can probably get it for around $700, $800 for the entire lens setup, which is killer. Remember, back in the day, I would have had to spend twice that money to get this same setup. With around a 12 to 25 millimeter range in micro four thirds terms, or 24 to 50 in full frame terms, this lens setup is one of the most versatile, probably one of the best lens setups you can ever get, because it also has a constant f1.8 aperture, which paired with the speed booster actually becomes an f1.2. So basically, if you're after shallow depth of field, this lens setup is probably one of the best out there. And if you consider the price, for under $1,000, you're getting a zoom range with an f1.2. Compare that to an Olympus Pro Prime, for example, a 17mm f1.2 or a 25mm f1.2. Just one of those lenses costs about the same amount as one of this one. So I know I've only said good things about this setup, but there are some things that I don't like. For example, sometimes I set it to autofocus, and then suddenly it'll just change to manual focus, and I'll check the button on the camera or the button on the lens. They're both set to autofocus, but suddenly it just changed to manual focus. So that's something to pay attention to. There are some glitches in the system. Also, it's not parfocal, which means when you zoom in or out, the focus shifts from where you set it. But I hear it's probably because of the Viltrox adapter, and the Metabones actually keeps the lens parfocal. But in my view, is the extra $500 worth it to you to have a parfocal lens? For some people it is. At the moment, for me, not really. Also, as it happens, there's actually an updated Viltrox adapter for the setup. It's called the EFM2 2. So pound for pound and dollar for dollar, I don't think there's a more cost-effective setup than this, but if you have one in mind, let me know down in the comments. I'd really love to know. Now moving on to event highlight videos, or my personal setup. This is a stripped down version because we don't have time to go through everything, but this is going to carry me for pretty much any job that I do. For this setup, there's only 3 lenses, and if you can guess all 3, well, congratulations, I don't have a prize for you, but I would be curious to see if anybody can guess it down in the comments below. The lenses I'd carry to any event highlight video job would be the Laowa 7.5mm f2, the Sigma 18-35, and then the Olympus 75mm 1.8. If any of you guys guess all 3 lenses without cheating, That's amazing, you're going places. With these 3 lenses, I have everything covered from ultra wide all the way to some mild telephoto. And if you notice that also all their apertures are relatively big, and I need that because a lot of the time these jobs are at night. And so while the investment for these 3 lenses is a little bit steep to begin with, it pays itself off many times over. The Laowa lens is a really nicely built lens. I don't care what anybody else says on the internet, this is a solid all metal manual lens. If any of you have any of the new smartphones like the iPhone 11 or GoPro, it's basically as wide as those cameras, but with Lumix video quality. This is basically perfect for establishing shots and gimbal shots. This lens basically sits on my B cam almost the entire shoot, and for establishing shots, I throw it on a gimbal and it's basically perfect for that setup. Now, side note, if you want your production to look good, there's a lot of ways to do it, but one of the ways that you can focus on is having a wide range of focal lengths in your video. People won't notice it actively, but subconsciously something tells you that the video is produced very well when there's a wide variety of focal lengths used, because it changes the way that you see things in the video and it communicates subconsciously to the viewer things that you want him or her to understand without actively saying it. Also, it's just good practice for you as an editor because it gives you a lot more options in the editing room after your shoot. So as far as I'm concerned, this is a really good lens, and the only thing to note is that it's because it's so wide, you have to pair it with another lens on a job. You can't be shooting everything ultra wide, it'll just look tacky. Moving on to the Sigma 18-35. We talked about this lens earlier and I could do a whole video about this lens, and I won't because there's already so many videos about this lens on YouTube. For all the footage that I capture in my video jobs, this lens probably does 80 to 90% of that. So if the world was ending and I had to do a video job, I don't know why I'd be doing a video job if the world was ending, but if it was and I could only bring one lens, it would be the Sigma for sure. With a lot of the events I shoot happening at night or indoors, I need as much light gathering as I can get, and even having primes that are f1.7 sometimes just isn't enough, and the 1.2 really helps. So something else to note about this lens setup is that I always have a backup lens because sometimes it does crap out on me, but it has never crapped out on me so bad that I've needed to use my backup lens. Most of the time I just turn the camera on or off or remove the battery and then we're back in business. So the last lens on this list is the Olympus 75mm f1.8, and this is kind of like my X Factor lens. The reason I use this lens is because it gives me a unique look that my other lenses can't provide. Sometimes I feel like with the Sigma, even though it's got a shallow depth of field and makes things look nice, there's a lot of content that look the same, and that's just a testament to how popular the Sigma is. But the Olympus 75mm f1.8 I find is actually a bit of a rare lens. Not a lot of people use this lens, and a lot of people that do use it for photos. So going back to something I said earlier about using a wide variety of focal lengths, this really helps me accomplish that. So going from ultra wide from the Laowa all the way to the Olympus, it gives me a really wide range of focal lengths, and I find that only the higher end videographers most of the time understand focal lengths and use a wide variety in their videos. So these 3 lenses in the right hands can do a lot of damage, and I have no doubt that videographers that are more skilled than me can take it to an even higher level that I can't even do right now. So I can wholeheartedly recommend this lens setup. So that's basically it. Those are my recommendations for video lenses in the Micro Four Thirds system. And I know that gear isn't everything, but when it comes time to thinking about your kit and what you need, it's really good to know what you're talking about.